So next up on the list are our network enumeration commands. And I'm just going to throw a few at you for now, but we're going to explain why they're important. So again, we're going to go ahead and enter into a shell. And let's take a look at some of them. The first may be obvious, but we're going to run an ipconfig. Now we can run an ipconfig and see what the IP address is of the machine. We can also get more details by running ipconfig/all and seeing a little bit more information than we did before. We can see the default gateway, we can see the DNS servers, etc. So this just provides information on the architecture. We might even see something like, if we're on a domain, we might see the domain controller here as a DNS server, or just get us a little bit more information as to where our next attack might be, what our subnet structure is, etc. So important to know. Another thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at our ARP table. So we can just say something like ARP-A for ARP-all. And this won't be that big on most CTF machines, but if you're in a lab environment, there's a chance that you might see another IP address here. So we see 2 and 255. Chances are this is a broadcast ID, and maybe this is your network ID here. It's hard to say without knowing for sure, but we know we're at a .5. Or actually, yes, our .2 is our DNS server, so we know we're talking to DNS, and then we have a .5, which is us. Maybe we saw like a .6 or a .7 or a .75, whatever. If we saw another IP address in here, I would be instantly suspicious as to why it's in our ARP table, especially in a lab environment, and how it's communicating with us and what we can do about it. So if you're not familiar with these networking protocols, then you're probably need to brush up on what ARP is or what ipconfig is, etc. Those aren't going to be taught in this course, but we should be looking at the ARP table. We should also be looking at the routing table. Something like a quick route print will tell us where this is communicating as well. So we're interested in seeing the 10 address, and you can see the 10.10.10.5. There's not like another network on here. Same thing with the IP config, by the way. Sometimes you see dual homed IP addresses where there's a 10.10.10.2, and maybe you would have something like a 10.10.10 or 10.10.11.2 or something like that, or .5, where we see a second NIC on this machine. And that would mean that this is communicating on one address and then communicating on another address. And maybe we don't even need to elevate, we just need to pivot on this machine. So there's a lot of different reasons for looking at what's going on here. Same thing with the ARP table. That's another thing. If we're communicating to another machine, that's important to know. The routing table, same thing. And then netstat is super important. So let's do a netstat-ANO and see what ports are out there. We should know, where are we talking to? Who are we communicating with? Well, you can see we're communicating with us over this 4444, and that's an established connection. But what about all these listening ports? Like, we're listening on 139, okay, but we have all these other IPs here that we're listening on. And how many of these actually showed up when we were looking at the box originally? Well, not a lot of them, right? We had 21 and 80. I didn't see any of these externally facing to us when we did a search. So where are these ports coming from? Here's UDP ports. Where are these ports coming from? Why are we seeing them, inside the box, but we're not seeing them outside the box? So maybe these services are only available to us from the inside network. And that could be interesting too, because that could allow us maybe to do some sort of port forwarding using a tool like Plink, or even Meterpreter can do it. And that's just a foreshadowing of what you might see a little bit later on in the course. So keep that in mind, that these internal services are important as well. So for now, we've established that we need to do some basic enumeration, right? We need to look at the systems, we need to look at the users, we need to look at the network, just kind of gather what's around us before we just start going crazy and looking around all the files and infrastructure. Now, when we get to the tools section, I'm going to show you all the tools that can do this for us. The next thing I want to show you before we move on and start looking at different tools and start talking exploits is I want to show you how to do some basic enumeration, hunting down passwords, and then we'll move on and start doing our actual exploitation and using tools and etc. So I'll catch you in the next video when we start talking about hunting down passwords.